Much of the allure belonging to Andrei Tarkovsky's filmography is reliant on his compelling visual style. One of the mainstays in the Soviet and world cinema canon, Tarkovsky is uncompromising in his approach to directing. Poetic musings, long takes, and philosophical monologues are abundant within the three films he made in the 1970s. Solaris, Mirror, and Stalker are each sensory-driven experiences that intrigue critics and fans alike. Made in close collaboration with legendary composer Eduard Artemyev, these three works contain soundscapes that enhance and develop their thematic identities. Shortly before Tarkovsky passed away in 1985, his final book was published in German. Titled Sculpting in Time, he aimed to demonstrate the following. The dominant, all-powerful factor of the film image is rhythm, expressing the course of time within the frame. Among the writings are multiple letters from filmgoers who express their various feelings when attempting to understand his work. A common feeling in each of them? Confusion. I saw your film Mirror. I sat through to the end, despite the fact that after the first hour I developed a severe headache as a result of my genuine efforts to analyze it, or just to have some idea of what was going on, of some connection between the characters and events and memories. We poor cinema goers see films that are good, bad, very bad, ordinary, or highly original, but any of these one can understand, and be delighted or bored as the case may be, but this one. Mainstream and commercial cinema is often subject to a separate categorization from art house films due to their perceived treatment of the audience member. Phrases like turn your brain off and entertainment are sometimes used to devalue the status of works that aren't prone to extensive analysis. Sculpting in Time attempts to delineate the nature of Tarkovsky's cinema into chapters that contain unfiltered thoughts on the meaning, production, and perception of his work. After I read the book, a sense of demystification absolves the need for deciphering a singular hidden meaning. The philosophy outlined toward the audience member here is devoid of pretension. There is no secret understanding of his films that one must unlock. Tarkovsky's utilization of medium specificity is reliant upon his unique approach to directing. When describing this concept in film, I automatically think of Stanley Kubrick's famous statement, "If it can be written or thought, it can be filmed," serving as encouragement toward filmmakers looking to perfect the blueprint when adapting works of literature. Avant-garde directors tend to drift toward opposing this. Avant-garde stalwarts, like Stan Brakhage, Maya Deren, and R. Bruce Elder, emphasize the capability of cinema's ability to allow the viewer to experience feelings and sensations otherwise impossible to replicate from another art form. Of the three films that Tarkovsky adapted from literature, each of them differ thematically from the source material. Much of this is attributed to the unique atmospheric quality evoked through a combination of cinematographic style and soundtrack. I find music in film most acceptable when it is used like a refrain. When we come across a refrain in poetry, we return, already in possession of what we have read, to the first cause which prompted the poet to write the lines originally. This refrain brings us back to our first experience of entering that poetic world, making it immediate and at the same time renewing it. We return, as it were, to its sources. Years before Tarkovsky's first professional feature-length film, a musician experimented with medium specificity in his own right. Born on November 30th, 1937, Eduard Nikolaevich Artemyev would study music at the Tchaikovsky Moscow State Conservatory with a specific interest in electronic composition. Primarily employing the use of synthesizers, Artemyev's work belongs in charting its timeline and usage to the modern day. The ANS synthesizer, which he used to compose a score for Solaris in 1972, was invented by Russian engineer Evgeny Murzin from 1937 to 1957. Influenced by synesthesia, which is the crossing of sensual pathways, the device is responsible for the development of the graphical sound subgenre of electronic music, in which visual imagery generates images of sound waves. Even prior to working with Artemyev, Tarkovsky's inclination to make Ivan's childhood spawned from the desire to detach cinema from its literary chains. He writes this in Sculpting in Time. What attracted me to Bogomilov's short story, Ivan? I have to say at the outset that not all prose can be transferred to the screen. Some works have a wholeness, and are endowed with a precise and original literary image. Characters are drawn in unfathomable depths. The composition has an extraordinary capacity for enchantment, and the book is indivisible. Through the pages comes the astonishing, unique personality of the author. Books like that are masterpieces, and only someone who's actually indifferent to both fine prose and to the cinema can conceive the urge to screen them. It is all the important to emphasize this point now. When the time has come for literature to be separated, once and for all, from cinema, other prose works are made by ideas, by clarity and firmness of structure, by originality of theme. Such writing seems not to be concerned with the aesthetic development of the thought it contains. I think Bogomilov's Ivan is in this category. Music as an art form is constrained to time in a way different to that of prose. It is within this space that Artemyev innovates, crafting humanity through dissonance. Using a section of Sculpting in Time titled Music and Noises, I will outline Tarkovsky's thoughts with my interpretations of how Artemyev works his craft. I'll cover and contextualize the prominent musical genres within the three films that Tarkovsky and Artemyev collaborated on, as well as a few favorite albums from within each of those genres. The slowness of Tarkovsky's work is wrought with a sustained attention to detail, ultimately crafting an experience where the concept of sculpting in time prevails. The dominant, all-powerful factor of the film image is rhythm, expressing the course of time within the frame. Artemyev's scores contain an emphasis on rhythm, or lack thereof, sustaining a dialectical relationship that emerges in accompaniment with each shot. Solaris' soundtrack was the first collaboration with Andrei Tarkovsky to employ the ANS synthesizer. The graphical sound element of the instrument can serve as a metaphor for the clash between author Stanislaw Lem and his ideas for the novel's adaptation, stating the science fiction element in Solaris was nonetheless too prominent and became a distraction. While the film centers itself around the human condition's reaction to sacrificial isolation in the pursuit of truth, the source material attempts to grapple with the impossibility of scientific reasoning when faced with the extraterrestrial. Both ideas can be categorized under the science fiction label, but the film's interpretation would cease to exist without the novel. Kelvin finds it difficult to distinguish reality from hallucinations, believing that his wife, who passed away 10 years ago, has returned from the dead. A form of her manifests on the ship, where it is later revealed that the planet uses Kelvin's memories in order to form an apparition. This motif is notable within one of the soundtrack's main genres, the previously mentioned graphical sound. Awareness of the medium itself here provides a gateway to an own kind of personal interpretation, a point that I associate with the highway tunnel sequence. Rate Your Music classifies graphical sound as a subgenre of composing electronic music in which drawings or markings are manually applied to a medium, typically a physical surface such as photographic film, paper, or discs of various materials, then processed by a machine that translates the markings into sound in real time, traditionally through photoelectric mechanisms. The ANS synthesizer employs this technique, metallic etchings and reverberating waves across the station. Artemyev stated this upon recollection of meeting Tarkovsky. Music as such was of no use at all to him in his films, and the job consisted more in arranging natural sounds, perhaps reworking them through the tones and rhythms of the synthesizer, and enriching these natural sounds by means of some kind of musical material that would endow them with an individual and specific emotional expressiveness. Traditional sonic structure never triumphs over personal innovation here, a trait present within the avant-garde tendencies on display. Duration is not a restriction, but a gift. English experimental group Coil is no stranger to exploring genres and tonal shifts within their music. ANS is an over 4-hour-long box set that is composed entirely of sounds generated via the titular instrument, providing insight into the timbre and acoustics of its distinct sound. Constant droning and pulsing notes pave the way for minimalistic sonic progression, akin to Morse code. These sounds are similar to the station sounds in Solaris, which hold more of an alien-like quality than the outer space itself. Computers here are now the markers of human interaction. Sue Harding's 2006 work, Dot Matrix, takes an interesting approach to sound art, employing repetition to create a layered experience. She utilizes the capabilities of a dot matrix printer, which creates unique visuals rather than drawing from a set of pre-existing characters when printing. The soothing and humanistic presence of box music in Solaris is juxtaposed and eventually overwhelmed by Artemyev's dissonant soundscape, drifting away from the classical conventions of rhythm and structure used in this type of music. I am not sure that in my films I have always succeeded in fulfilling the theoretical demands I am putting forward here. I have to say that in my heart of hearts I don't believe films need music at all. However, I have not yet made a film without it, though I moved in that direction in Stalker and Nostalgia. For the moment at least, music has always had a rightful place in my films and has been important and precious. One of the underappreciated pioneers of electronic music, Daphne Orum's Oramics, uses a drawn sound technique featuring 35mm film strips where the shapes themselves are used to create individual sounds. This is similar to the anthropomorphic approach that Tarkovsky takes when presenting the entity of Solaris. This is the precise thing that Lem strove to avoid in his novel. Here, I think the subtle variations in structure and interpretation of the film are similar to the physical manifestations of Orum's work, where the physical alteration of the material, which is one step removed from human agency, ultimately shapes the noise. While Tarkovsky ultimately expressed disappointment after the completion of Solaris, its refusal to remain locked within a singular genre is also its greatest strength. Its refusal to adhere to the conventions of science fiction strengthens the existential nature of Kelvin's character. The same can be said for its innovative utilization of the ANS synthesizer. Stalker's soundtrack takes a meditative approach similar to that of its characters. The audience is taken on a progressive journey in which conversations become more revealing than the narrative or the direct actions being taken. Artemyev utilizes a distinct electronic identity here, and sense of rhythm to juxtapose the dilapidated yet somehow alluring environment. Progressive electronic is a genre that emerged in the late 1960s and early 1970s with the advent of synthesizers and other technological advancements in music production. The genre is defined by its extensive use of electronic instruments like synthesizers adapted into compositions, as well as its willingness to experiment with a diverse range of sounds and influences. One of the primary aspects of progressive electronic music is the emphasis on creating a sense of progression or development throughout a piece of music. As such, layered soundscapes, intricate changes in rhythm, and a wide range of sound effects and textures are commonly used in the genre. Improvisation is also a key characteristic of progressive electronic music, as many musicians use improvisation to create new and inventive sounds rather than relying on synthesizer presets. The anticipation of the journey to the zone takes place at a slow pace. Industrial areas are transformed into a form of palpable poison. Uneven puddles, downed power lines, and derelict buildings mark the dreariness of the world. Tangerine Dream's 1972 album Zeit channels the sentiment of its cover. A descent into one's deep, dark consciousness. Can one ever realize what they truly desire? A search ensues, peering into the infinite here. The dark ambient makes itself present in this album, as well as in Artemyev's soundtrack. Echoes drip and reflect on prolonged metallic drones. I should like to hope that it has never been a flat illustration of what was happening on the screen, to be felt as a kind of emotional aura around the object shown, in order to force the audience to see the image in the way I want it. In every instance, music and cinema is a natural part of our resonant world, a part of human life. Nevertheless, it is quite possible that in a sound film that is realized with complete theoretical consistency, there will be no place for music. It will be replaced by the sounds in which cinema constantly discovers new levels of meaning. That is what I was aiming at in Stalker and Nostalgia. Manuel Gutsching's 1984 album E2E4 consists of a cacophony of sounds layered upon one another. Traces of Berlin school reveal themselves through improvisation. And somewhat accidental precursor to ambient house groups like The Orb, the record was never meant to be danceable in the first place. The roadside picnic metaphor in Stalker channels the sentiment outlined prior. Conversations held between the stalker, writer, and professor along their journey seem to revolve around a singular goal: to get into the zone. However, the zone reveals what already exists, determined by fate, or perhaps humans are nothing but a speck of dust upon an extraterrestrial being's footprint. Can what is already discarded be used for its original purpose by another species? Can that purpose even be recognized? The same can be said for the sounds present in Artemyev's soundtrack. Unknown Mortal Orchestra's SBO4, released in 2016, is the fifth installment in the New Zealand band's once-yearly series. This project here is split into vignettes, each with a seemingly unrelated and different structure. SBO5, the next installment in the series, is the only project that connects to another album, serving as a teaser for each song on the once pending release of Sex and Food. Listening to these every year on Christmas for so long, only for it to be revealed as a sketchbook, is reminiscent of the stylistic choices in Stalker. Why is the ending scene the only scene filmed in color that takes place outside of the zone? Artemyev uses a sense of progression here that rebounds and unfolds, never losing sight of its goal, chronicling a kaleidoscope of emotion. Used this way, music does more than intensify the impression of the visual image by providing a parallel illustration of the same idea. It opens up the possibility of a new, transfigured impression of the same material, something different in kind. Plunging into the musical element in which the refrain brings into being, we return again and again to the emotions the film has given us, with our experience deepened each time by new impressions. With the introduction of musical progression, the life recorded in the frame can change its color and sometimes even its essence. Artemyev's use of the ambient genre is also at its most prominent here. A mainstay in the canon of ambient projects, the tired sounds of Stars of the Lid samples the ending of Stalker in the second track, Requiem for Dying Mothers Part 2. The degradation of the world outside the zone in the film is marred by a sepia hue. Noise pollution is rampant in the rundown industrial areas, yet the sounds here soon become familiar. This track is indicative of the integration of natural sounds into one's environment displayed in Stalker. Robert Rich's collaboration with Welsh musician Brian Williams' moniker B. Lusmord was directly inspired by both the film and soundtrack, hence its name. Peering into a tunnel with no light in sight, yet still believing that light exists at the end of it. Artemyev in the film uses the foreign, sometimes dreary quality of electronic acoustics to highlight the humanity found within the sounds of everyday life, the tones we take for granted. Often regarded as Tarkovsky's most personal work, the autobiographical nature of Mirror relies on the clashing of the past, present, and future. Employing a nonlinear structure, poems from Andrei's father, Andrei Tarkovsky, serves as inspiration for the Wonderic imagery. My interpretation of the opening of Mirror is rooted within Tarkovsky's personal ideology toward faith and film, a concept that is prominent within the score. I believe that the opening sequence in which the boy undergoes a procedural hypnosis serves an opposite effect to the boy when compared to that of the audience. The doctor's instructions to the boy are pointless and only serve to distract him from the actual methodology she uses, which continues to remain unknown. Electroacoustic music involves the electronic manipulation and processing of sounds, including acoustic sources from field recordings and spoken word, and synthetic sources generated by various means, with techniques and effects such as looping and layering, crossfading, speeding up and slowing down, spectral analysis, reversing, reverb, and distortion to create atmospheric and vivid yet abstracted pieces. A singular moment allows him to speak, and the audience is left to think about the sequence for the rest of the film, only for it to have no blatant connection to the rest of the plot. One of my favorite quotes from Sculpting in Time that I believe can be attributed to this sequence is, "Usually the poetry of the memory is destroyed by confrontation with its origin." Electroacoustic as a genre is built of sounds that are unknown to the listener without outside context, effects that destroy and rebuild themselves simultaneously from unnatural and natural sources. Instrumentation here can be found in any object. We wanted the sound to be close to that of an earthly echo, filled with poetic suggestion, to rustling to sighing. The notes had to convey the fact that reality is conditional, and at the time accurately to reproduce precise states of mind, the sounds of a person's interior world. The moment we hear what it is and realize that it's being constructed, electronic music dies, and Artemyev had to use complex devices to achieve the sounds we wanted. Electronic music must be purged of its chemical origins, so that, as we listen, we may catch it in the primary notes of the world. Of course, our ability to hear is what provides meaning to the sound. In the opening scene, a sudden burst of consciousness induced through a form of language, diegetically physical/speech therapy, contrasted with non-diegetically, the main elements of the film, time and space. The first color sequence after the opening credits features two notable shots in Tarkovsky's filmography: the zoom in on Alexei's mother sitting on the fence, and the doctor walking in an open field of grass, with the wind blowing gracefully in its wake. The shot is beautiful and poetic. However, it is not of natural origin. Tarkovsky actually used a helicopter, and the blades that spun caused the vibrations in the grass to achieve that effect. Stripping drones of any discernible pattern, Elian Rodig's 1987 album Jetson Mila puts you in a trance-like state. Sonic diffusion occurs on a minuscule scale. How can the selected assortment of Alexei's memories in Mirror represent his life as a whole? Campo James Neal's project, Birchville Cat Motel, transforms drone into spectacle with the release of the 2004 album Beautiful Spec Triumph. In Mirror, the audience has an inclination that cannot be quenched by anything but memory, leading us to return to our internal desires. Our memory of the opening sequence reveals itself only after we complete the entirety of the film. Lithuanian ambient project Approaching Mountains' 2004 release Calm for Radar Systems turns dissonance and feedback into charged space dust. I pictured the inner workings of an outdated yet still working telescope chronicling its final hour on Earth when listening to this. My thoughts on the three films come full circle in this comparison here. It's as if the desire to unearth the inner workings of the repressed memories in Solaris appear in their raw form in Mirror. If one has the desire to understand the meaning of Mirror, they must do so through a process of self-realization in which the initial analytical approach leads to an individual acceptance of faith that will ultimately remain unconfirmed. Memories are created through lived experience, but they change every time we revisit them. Our brain recognizes sounds and attaches them to memories via sensory perception, something that is only recognizable on an individual basis. If we read too much into Artemyev's sounds in Mirror, they get destroyed by the realization of their naturalistic tendencies. However, if we let the music soak in and blend with the natural environment, we understand to the full extent of why the sounds work alongside the memories. Musique concrète is a specific form of electroacoustic that deals with the manipulation of environmental sounds, which includes field recordings, natural sounds, and real-world noises. Rather than having to visualize, write, and perform from the abstract to the concrete, musique concrète composers start from already existing noises to manipulate them into abstraction, disregarding the standard notions of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Mirror is the farthest Tarkovsky ever strayed into the essay film categorization. The movie is self-referential in form and uses a limited soundtrack blended with Artemyev's individual sound. It may be that in order to make the cinematic image sound authentically in its full diapason, music has to be abandoned. For strictly speaking, the world is transformed by cinema and the world is transformed by music are parallel and conflict with each other. Properly organized in a film, the resonant world is musical in its essence, and that is the true music of cinema. Karlheinz Stockhausen's 1962 work, Gesang der Junglinge, consists of sine tones, clicks, and white noise resulting in a balance-based composition. A similar sense of novelty is showcased within Mirror. A child's voice grapples with the past and present. Order arises out of nothingness. Structures from silence, no pun intended for fans of the great Steve Roach. The overlooked murmur of our Earth is no longer rendered obsolete under Michael Pissarro's watch and is in the 2019 album Nature Denatured and Found Again. Both Stalker and Mirror attempt to blur the perception of diegetic sounds with non-diegetic ones, a sentiment that Pissarro uses to amplify the minutiae of our natural environment. In a 1979 interview, Tarkovsky states, "I would like most of the noise and sound to be composed by a composer. In the film, for example, the three people undertake a long journey in a railway car. I like that the noise of the wheels on the rails not be the natural sound but elaborated upon by the composer with electronic music. At the same time, one mustn't be aware of music, nor natural sounds. We see this present in Stalker and also in Mirror." If you wondered what it would sound like if a ghost recorded ASMR in the setting of Dante's Inferno, look no further than Ronce's 2021 album, Malignant. The jarring violence on display in the archival footage ingrains a sense of harsh reality that expands on Tarkovsky's metacinematic approach. Whispered poetic vocals swell in volume, culminating in bursts of death industrial adjacent reverberations. But music is not just an appendage to the visual image. It must be an essential element of the realization of the concept as a whole. Properly used, music has the capacity to change the whole emotional tone of a film sequence. It must be so completely one with the visual image that if it were to be removed from a particular episode, the visual image would not just be weaker in its idea and impact, it would be qualitatively different. It is in the stream of consciousness where feelings arise. Rejection of fixed meanings, the rejection of a set rhythm. Above all, I feel that the sounds of this world are so beautiful in themselves that if only we could learn to listen to them properly, cinema would have no need of music at all. I'm glad that Artemyev's work exists to enrich the earthly sounds that we take for granted. I encourage you to listen to his work by watching the films and listening to the tracks on their own as well. The collaboration between him and Tarkovsky is one of a kind. The images merge and mesh with the sounds in mysterious yet magical ways. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on the work of Tarkovsky, I'll link my Stalker video down below, which compares both the book and the novel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts in general, I'd appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to go above and beyond to support my work, my Patreon is linked down below in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I truly appreciate it.